technology enthusiast. And so we have a lot of really awesome people talking today about multiple displays, postures, and poses. We're also setting up simultaneously, so excuse us.
Everybody on the mic, please speak very close to the mic.
Closer?
Close.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So our first speaker is actually going to be Whitney Mallet. She's a writer, and her talk is on wearables, smart textiles, luxury, and privacy. We are also then going to hear from Elizabeth Wissinger, and she is a sociologist of fashion, researching how bodies are expressed through technology. Her book, This Year's Model, Fashion, Media, and the Making of Glamour, is coming out this summer on NYU Press, and everyone is invited to her book party. And she will be talking today on wearing our hearts on our sleeves, wearable tech, and the future of digital-human interface. We then have Brooke Duffy. She is an assistant professor at Temple University, studying gender and cultural production in both traditional and digital media environments. And she's also currently working on a book on gender label in social media industries. And her talk today is going to be on social media's reliance on aspirational labor. And then finally we have Autumn Whitefield-Majama, and her writings about the implications of beauty and personal appearance have appeared in The New Inquiry, The Guardian, Marie Claire, and more. Her book on the matter is to be published by Simon & Schuster in spring 2016. And she will be talking on real women, post-purpose, social media, and the therapeutic narrative of beauty. And then we have our hashmod, Max Mormon, who is summer fantastic. And he is a PhD candidate in communications at Columbia University, and he's currently working on a dissertation focusing on the history, culture, and experience of early adopters of virtual reality technologies. So that's us. So why don't we just, since we have limited time, get right to it.
Okay. My talk is on dress codes, luxury and privacy in a post-wearables world. It's based on an article I wrote recently that you can read the full thing. It's on topicalcream.info, which is a site that has lots of great things about women working in fashion, art, and technology. So right now, if you just Google wearables, mostly glasses and watches come up. But as computational technology is getting smaller and smaller, we're going to have a lot more smart textiles in the market. So it's not just some little computer that can fit on your glasses. It's going to be actually computational technology that's going to be able to be woven in fibers that can be knit or whatever into a garment. Moore's law, computers are just getting smaller and smaller. If this continues, we're going to see really, really small computers. And so I think this is going to change wearables a lot because right now they're very visible. I don't know if you went to parties when people were wearing Google glasses, but I think that I don't think Google glasses were very good. I think they were more good about having people notice you were wearing Google glasses. Some cool people wear Google glasses, lots of celebrities. So I think that there was a lot of status associated with Google glasses, and it was more about being seen wearing Google glasses. Google glasses showed up in Vogue in 2013. Here's someone wearing Google glasses while they're reading about Google glasses in Vogue. And then November 2014, the Apple Watch had its print debut in Vogue China and also had a 10-page plus spread in there as well. So we start seeing the early wearables are really being targeted at a luxury market. Part of that's just because when something's new, its price point is really high, and you need to kind of charge really high price for then the money to come back into research and development. But I think also it creates a lot of aspiration. You think there's something, rich and famous people are the ones wearing wearables, we should all have wearables too. Just a side note, it's funny that Vogue has really been at the cutting edge of putting wearables in fashion spreads because Anna Wintour notoriously still uses a flip phone. which I think is both ironic but also telling. We're having a lot of trickle down also into like sort of like not quite luxury but more like aspirational luxury. This is a Misfit, which I think is purposely made to sound like Fitbit. You know, targets how much you're sleeping, how much steps you take, that kind of stuff. But there's a Swarovski crystal model, so I think we're starting to see some of these wearables come into the, I don't know if you want to call it like mid-range luxury, like where middle-class people buy products that they think rich people buy, but rich people actually don't buy. Like this is like price point around $169 versus Google Glass is like 10 times that. So I feel like right now, because wearables are really visible, the categories of luxury that they're entering are already those like categories that we have for glasses and watches. It's kind of high end, middle end. But as these wearables get smaller and smaller, I think some of these categories of luxury will be disrupted because it's going to be more about invisibility and less about visibility. And I think a privilege will become to not being monitored, to being invisible, not in the sense necessarily of whether you can see the wearable, but being invisible to some larger surveillance. So right now, maybe a lot of wearables don't seem that appealing, but as they get smarter and these textiles get smarter, some of the really cool things they'll be able to do, they're going to be able to send, some of these things they can already do, but it's going to be more and more intuitive and more integrated. Send and receive data, store energy, control body temperature, so you could have like a coat and it can read your body temperature, and then it can like adjust porosity to make, you know, when you're hot it can have more breathability, when you're cold it can have less. Haptic feedback, you're going to have, you know, it can, instead of your phone vibrating in your pocket, maybe like your sleeve vibrates, you know, just stuff like that's going to be happening more and more. But I think one thing that's really important is, as they're kind of trying to sell us on all these features, to think about data. And right now, the most popular wearable products are kind of in this quantified self movement. And I think that's being very normalized, that this data is really valuable to you, like how many steps you take. And but I'm a little bit skeptical, like I don't know how important it is to me, that kind of data. I'm a little skeptical that there's sort of this over-marketing of how appealing this data is to you, when really it's more that they want to just get you used to being tracked. And the precedent, these, you know, products are becoming more and more popular, more and more mainstream availability, price points are going down. As I said, they're going to become smaller, and so some of these kind of concerns might become more obscured when you don't even notice, you can't even see your Fitbit, it's like just in your bra, it's in the fibers. But right now the precedent is there's very little regulation on how your data is stored, saved, shared. The FDA, because a lot of these products are considered general wellness products, technically the Federal Drug Administration could have purview, but they basically just decided to be totally hands-off unless the product is giving a direct diagnosis. So basically they're being pretty hands-off. The FTC has made some you know, suggestions. They published a report this January that suggested these 3 things, which kind of like you think would be obvious, like maybe you should test your security measures before you launch a product, or not keep people's data forever. But they're all going to keep people's data for as long as they think it's valuable. I mean, you don't want to be the person working at the corporation who deleted all the data, and then they could have used, like, I don't know. So the question is, will privacy become a luxury? Or arguably it already is a luxury, it's just going to become something in our own clothes that's more, like these issues are already, you know, you have to, ad blockers and things are already something that's a luxury and a privilege. You have to pay more money to get these kind of products, but is this going to start translating into our clothes? So some questions. Some of these are thanks to someone who read my article and tweeted a lot. I can't remember his name, like Good Beer or something. I forgot, I meant to try to remember. But he posed the question, will shopping non-data be like shopping non-GMO? Is it going to become something that only people who have the resources, time, and education, and money have. But what about people that don't have access to wearable tech? If we're thinking about the privilege of having clothes that don't track you, what about the people who don't even have the money to buy the clothes that do track you? Is it going to be extreme rich and poor that aren't being monitored? And will this data even be able to be used effectively and sinisterly? Like, what if it's just too much white noise, which we already, have seen, like that squeaky dolphin report showed that, like, a lot of these surveillance agencies don't even know what to do with all the data they're tracking. And the other question is, do most people even care about privacy? It seems like a lot of people just care about convenience a lot more. I don't know if anyone saw that interview with Snowden, that on that last, what's that guy's name? Yeah. He had that thing where apparently people don't really care about their data very much, but they do care about dick pics being shared. So in this, thinking about that and thinking about wearables, I think wearables are haptics and kind of teledildonics and VR. That's all about to really blow up in the porn world. So maybe if their sex life is their only thing that they really consider intimate and private, maybe that's something that will provoke people, because that's going to become more and more networked and more wearables for those products. That's a question. And here's some, further reading. There's a woman who works at Pratt and directs the lab there. And if you want to just know more about the advances in the actual technology of wearables and the smart fabrics, she's a really great resource. And then these are some further reading too about just kind of privacy and regulation. There's a great article by Kate Crawford and Jason Schultz, and another one by Adam Terrier that talks about how we can have regulation that doesn't limit innovation. And that's it.
So next we're hearing from Elizabeth.
That's one of the drawbacks of doing Prezi, but the freedom it allows is why I choose it. So hello, I am Elizabeth Wissinger at Betsy Wiss, and I will be speaking about wearable technology and gender and the future of digital human interface. So let's see if we can get this to work. Okay, wearable tech. The worldwide sales are projected to reach $53.2 billion by 2019. As fashion converts wearables from geek to chic, we need to look at how the emerging realm of wearable technology is shaping and being shaped by conceptions of gender in the body. Just to emphasize my point. There you go. So there are many forms of wearable tech. I'm going to zip through this part, but I'm happy to share this information with anyone later on. There are several different kinds. For the most part, they tend to be either revealing and externalizing, biometric, connecting, navigational, or for control and surveillance, and sometimes all of them are for control and surveillance, but they don't admit that. So when we think about revealing and externalizing, we want to show emotion, share experiences, show excitement or other changes in bodily state, or connectivity via shared affect. So here is a dress that went down the runway. Cute Circuit is one of the first wearable tech companies to have a runway show. And this is a dress that people were tweeting, make it pink, make it black, and it was changing colors as she was going down the runway. This is a pendant that could be worn in an event such as this, where we can get everybody's pendants blinking in rhythm or in the same color, depending on what we're tweeting and how we're communicating with each other. It's made by, now I'm going to forget the name of the company, but the pendant is called the Tribe Pendant. There are ways of showing our emotion that responds through our mood and brainwaves. So this is the Nekomimi cat ears, which allow you to literally prick up your ears when you're excited about something. So this is another way of showing emotion. Biometric technologies tend to look toward measuring brainwaves. There are sleep trackers, motion sensors, posture prompters, etc. So we have here the Melon headband, which measures focus and is supposed to make you work more productively. Here is habit control via Fitbit or the Nike Fuel Band. There are also fitness and optimization versions where you put something on like the heart monitor, but there are also muscle twitch measurers and things that talk to your phone when you're working out to make you into a superhuman person. And there are posture tracking. This is the Lumo Lift, which I call your mother in a box. Stand up straight. You're not, you shouldn't slouch, it's unattractive. And all of these, I can't help it. I showed this in February. I'm going to show it again. They remind me of visions of the future that were very cautionary, and this is a scene for those of you who are way too young to know from Star Trek, and this is an episode in which this was how they were imprisoned. Okay, so connectivity is usually the space where fashion comes to play with wearable tech, and the Google Glass we just heard a bit about, and it is famous for being horribly geeky, even though Diane von Furstenberg did try to make it interesting and lovely, but you know what, I guess I'm just gonna, oh, it's telling me, okay, good, thank you. So the fashionable alternatives, sorry, when tech becomes fashionable, it is portending ubiquity, that it's going to be everywhere, we're all going to have it, we're all going to be wearing it, and Wendy was just pointing out, it's going to be invisible. So there are several different types of tech that have been worn. As you can see, the Google Glass is, I don't know if it's that bad, but it has been claimed to be fashion suicide for anyone wearing it. There is, I think you had mentioned that there are rings that you can wear that connect to your phone. They let you know when somebody's calling you, and you can ignore your phone otherwise. This is the My Intelligent Communication Accessory, the MICA, which was a much ballyhooed collaboration between high-end opening ceremony and the Midtown store that maybe the graduate students in the room don't know about. It's a very expensive store in Midtown called Barney's. The Fitbit was Tory Burch designer's chic take on the Fitbit was another way of keeping track of your movement, and now there's a move toward taking the device and putting it into different pieces of jewelry. So the technology is getting smaller and smaller, and it can go into all sorts of different places. And this is an example of the cuff. So in contrast to geek tech, the chic tech, in contrast to chic tech, the geek tech has its origins, and this is a picture of the Borg group from MIT in the 90s. And when they were wearing their technology, it was more about memory enhancement and having your data at your fingertips. So it was empowering you and giving you access to your data. But it seems now, as fashion is getting hold of all of, and it's not just fashion, excuse me, but as wearables are making it more possible to track your data and everybody's data, it's more about your data being available to somebody else who wants it, as Helen Nissenbaum has pointed out in her work on privacy issues, and Deborah Lupton's in this great digital sociology blog where she's talked about things like forced tracking to save corporations money so that people are healthier because they're paying more attention to their steps and they're exercising more. So the internet shifted from a tool for us to use into a tool for using us. And so as digital sociology researcher Deborah Lupton acertically pointed out, the male-dominated nature of digital technology culture results in a certain blindness to the needs of women. So when we're transitioning to wearable tech, it's going to be, I hope not, but it seems to be going in a direction of tools for using us. So will fashion's involvement impose gendered assumptions about bodies on the becoming tautological body? This question becomes particularly important as the popularization of wearable tech by fashion intensifies the datification of the body or the availability of the body as data. So at a recent expo, showcasing fashion as wearable tech, a panelist enthused, we want to know who the amazing, incredible Woman 2.0 is. And who is Woman 2.0? When it comes to tech and design, how does gender matter? Preliminary investigation has revealed that many of the forays into marrying fashion and tech result in products demonstrating deep-seated cultural ambivalence about women and their needs, both in private and public space. So who is Woman 2.0? Does she get lost? There's an app and a jacket for that. So you don't want to be staring at your phone like a tourist, so you put your phone in your pocket and your jacket nudges you in which direction you want to go once you preset the map. This is the Navigate jacket, or Wayfinding jacket. Is Woman 2.0 at the mercy of her emotions? Well, here's a bra that's going to warn you if you're going to overeat. Now, this was a well-publicized flop. And in Slate.com, Katie Waldman snarked, "What a sign of progress. The technology now recognizes the holy trinity of womanhood, emotional instability, and weight." So, and this was actually developed by a woman, but it wasn't produced. Is Woman 2.0 a damsel in distress? Do we need body alarms? Smart siren technology thinks so, and this ring emits a shockingly loud alarm that might change the dynamic between wearer and attacker. These are anti-rape panties, which is a high-tech fiber that you can't cut or break through, to be worn in potentially dangerous situations, such as clubbing on a first date, running alone at night, or traveling abroad. In other words, when a woman is alone and out by herself, that's when she's in danger. So who is Woman 2.0? Who's deciding? So all of the female tech designers I spoke to, all the tech designers, let me back up. The fashion tech designers, that they do both, the ones that I've met have been women. And what a surprise. They say the world is full of programmers. This tech and fashion, when they merge, Silicon Valley is about a boy culture meeting a female culture. One designer who was very talented said that people she worked with questioned her ability to actually do the technological aspects of her smart jewelry. And then this very young, lovely fashion designer who got involved with 3D printing and wearable tech said that the programmers were asking, what is this pretty little fashion girl doing with these complex programming languages? So these were the experiences of some of the people that I met. But it seems, if we think about it in terms of Garments of Paradise author Susan Elizabeth Ryan's book, that there's this issue of the masculinity of technology, then it's a simplistic formulation of fashion is feminine, tech is masculine, fashion plus tech is tech for women designed by men. But it's not that simple, obviously. So when asked who are you designing for, many designers do cite the busy mom who wants to filter out the noise of the need to get millennial fashionistas to take their faces out of their phones and re-engage with people in person. There is a goal, this is a goal of Kate Unsworth of Cohort Designs, who champions digital detoxification, saying forget fear of missing out and embrace joy of missing out, JOMO. So the design, the technology is in the necklace, and she's saying that this necklace will help you cut the crap out of your digital life, because it talks to your phone and it alerts you when important things are coming through so you can put your phone away. So is the desire to return to face-to-face contact and emotional connection a gendered value or a human one? Who is Woman 2.0 really? So I have a ton of text here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through it all. Does that say 5 minutes? Okay, I should be okay. So when it comes to technology, how does gender matter? Designers want to know, what will the customer cherish or love enough to put on their body? Is it pretty? Is it useful? Is it comfortable? Is it fun? Where is the value? As one fashion tech designer pointed out, people do want to be safe. For me, it's less about functionality than it is about self-expression. Yet creative self-expression is not yet valued in my experience of the tech world. Further, fashion and tech are very different cultures. Is one masculine? Not necessarily, but the idea that the tech has to do something is firmly entrenched. If it's pretty and attracts data, then it is useful, yes. Yes, but how is usefulness shaped by cultural expectations of gender? As Brittany Fior-Salvas and Gina Neff have noted, data are not self-evident, but rather take on valences, which contain an anticipation of value or an expectation of performance within a particular ecology or system. And if data's value is anticipated, how is gender a valence of data? Is data gendered in terms of an anticipation of its performance within notions of what a body is and what it can do? If there is ubiquitous data tracking, the body becomes datalogical, but as Patricia Goff and everyone in this room have pointed out, just kidding, some of the people in this room have pointed this out, the datalogical body encourages a valuing of the body in terms of its liquidity of capacity, its potential to become more than or different from what it is. So if our handheld devices have intensified what I have called the glamour labor of our selfie-sticked, constantly online life, then how will wearables take this to the next level? So I love that one, their stretched out arms, like solves the problem for us, right? It's the Marshall McLuhan kind of extension of the self-bite technology. So glamour labor is the work to augment one's glamour across social media platforms while striving to embody this glamorous image in the flesh. This is a concept that I talked about in my book. Get ready for shameless self-promotion, but I am very proud that I did this book, and it's coming out in August or September. If you go on Amazon, it's available for pre-order, and this book really set up the groundwork for this research that I'm doing now, and I'm asking now how putting these tracking and recording texts onto our bodies intensify these demands. So if we're looking at the push for liquidity in terms of hemming in or freeing the body via wearable tech, then as Natasha Del Scholl has observed, it's not just the behavior, but the person, not just the design, the configuration, the way that it can constrain and direct and guide behavior in certain directions. This is why it might be a good idea to regulate it. As you had pointed out, there's no FDA controlling technology. And she is arguing there should be researchers and policymakers in conversation with the intimate and even physiological ways that these things affect people. Now, she's written about addiction, tech addiction, like spending 4 hours on Facebook looking at your grammar school friends' vacation photos. But she is saying that there's a possibility that there will be physiological effects that are unanticipated. And anthropologist Jamie Sherman observes that intimate data gathering implies an ideal body that is no longer explicit, but rather imagined or performed within and through bodies whose outputs are being quantified. So can this body be envisioned outside of cultural ideals? The visuals are implied but not articulated. So she used as an example that if you say I'm a QSer, I'm a quantified self person, I track my data because I want to be faster and stronger as a running. Is it a runner? Is it implied that you want a runner's body? I take that body. So Sherman maintains that rather than glue tech and fashion together, the aim should be to create something where observers might say, what the hell is that for? Not to do something pragmatic. So here is a dress that you can literally get your hackles up if somebody comes too close to you. Or here's a dress where if you want it to look like a lid from within soccer ball, go for it. But we don't know what that's for, but it may take us in directions we hadn't anticipated before. So Alison Lewis sees a lot of potential in tech as a tool of creative self-expression, yet personal expression, she argues, is not considered a value in her experience of the wearable tech world. Well, the perception of value is changing. There's a big struggle going on over it, she says, in terms of the values the tech itself expresses. So what if the potential for wearable tech to get our bodies out from under cookie-cutter assumptions of what a body is or should be for were at our command rather than produced in the hustle to be seen or matter, the kind of social media and body control on steroids fashionable wearables portend? This is my utopian moment. Come on, guys, it's supposed to be funny. All right, just the internet. Just like the internet before, wearable tech has the potential to radically enhance many lives. It would be a shame to squander this potential on short-sighted devices that extend existing anxieties in ways that limit or control human potential, gendered or otherwise. As tech innovator Billy Whitehouse observed at a recent panel on Pratt Institute's BF&DA, wearable tech's true potential lies not in its ability to control us. Here's your data, enjoy, but its ability to augment our experiences. So I'm leaving you with my research and its aim, which is to find a way to keep wearable tech on the path toward augmenting rather than harnessing human potential. And please forgive the heterosexual assumptions. This is the end. But I leave you with underwear, which, as you may be able to surmise from here, that it's a tool for long-distance lovers. So you wear the underwear, and one person does something to the phone, and the other person says, ooh. So thank you very much.
Silent applause, guys. So next we have Brooke up.
Yeah, thank you. Let's get set up here. Success. Okay. Today I'm going to be presenting some highlights from my research on aspirational labor, and this is a concept I've been developing for the past few years. And my aim here is really to offer a more nuanced but also more grounded analysis of gender and social labor activities. And these are the kind of activities that I've been analyzing since I attended my first Theorizing the Web conference 2 years ago. Is volume okay? Yeah, if not, wave me up close. Okay. So I'm looking here at fashion and beauty blogging, styling, and design, all of which may be conceptualized as forms of digital labor. Now, for those of you not familiar with the debates, since the early 2000s, internet researchers have sought to examine various activities that are emerging in these fuzzy spaces between production and consumption, between labor and leisure, between professional and amateur. And the so-called digital labor debate really pivots on the issue of whether uncompensated digital media activities, so for example, if I am commenting on a TV review board or creating a YouTube parody, if these represent forms of empowerment, yay, generating content for major brands, or alternatively, if these are really free labor that are harnessed by digital media companies. Perhaps not surprisingly, the laudatory perspective comes from members of the media and marketing communities, while alternatively, scholars and critical theorists, including people here at this event, tend to really emphasize the exploitative nature of unpaid work. Now, this research has been very useful, but despite the utility, I have two critiques of it, and really what I'm pointing out here are some of the noteworthy gaps in the literature. The first is the lack of attention to gendered subjectivities, and specifically gendered production. So this is not to say that scholars have not looked at the consumption, but really interested in the production. And fortunately, we've seen a little bit of an uptick in this kind of research as researchers are looking at DIY communities, microfinancing, and so forth. The second critique of the digital labor debate is the fact that it tends to overlook the meaning-making activities of participants. And put simply, the question is, why are people engaging in these various activities? I think we really need to understand this beyond just making assumptions. So in response to this, I've spent the last 2 years conducting personal interviews with fashion bloggers, beauty bloggers, online stylists, as well as some executives involved in various roles in these industries. And again, really trying to understand participants' experiences and aspirations in their own voices. I've also conducted participant observation at a wide range of social media events, digital conferences, blogger events. I went to New York Fashion Week. I'm not from New York, but I have never felt so insecure as being at digital or at New York Fashion Week. So that was a fun experience. And finally, I have this book up here. So what I've been doing is looking at professionalization resources to really understand how individuals trying to break into the fashion industries and so forth are being socialized. And so drawing on this data, I argue that many of the activities these young women I've been studying, they engage in activities that I conceptualize as aspirational labor. I see this as a highly gendered, forward-looking, and entrepreneurial enactment of creative activities that have two main parts. The first is a belief that the activities will pay off. And second, individuals engaged in these activities remain suspended in the highly gendered consumption and production of branded goods. And so my use here is not of aspirational, is not incidental. You know, like aspirational consumption, if I go out and purchase this luxury good to suggest I'm a member of this elite status, these young women see aspirational labor as a way to mark themselves as someone who will one day be compensated for their participation in these various activities. And so despite a lot of variances in aspirational labor activities, like I said, I've been interviewing a great deal of people. What I thought would be most helpful today is if I focus on a few features that seem to run across these various experiences and kind of give you examples of these. And so I'm going to be looking at 4 different features of aspirational labor: the ordinary self-presentation, compulsory visibility, relationship building and monitoring, and finally brand devotion. And it'll soon become apparent that these various features overlapped and intersect in various ways. And I'm really separating them to just kind of tease out the nuances. And I hope that by looking at these, we can get an understanding of the narratives that really sustain these various aspirational labor activities. So I'll start with ordinary self-presentation. So at first blush, blogs, vlogs, and the like seem to reaffirm this narrative of digital democratization. After all, can anyone just go out and create a fashion blog? My research actually, challenges this idea that social media influencers are, quote, just like us. Instead, the fashion blogosphere in particular is structured in a way that privileges those with existing reserves of economic and social capital. So certainly is the visible enactment of one's personal style. Fashion blogs center on clothing, accessories, beauty products, and so forth, all of which require participation in the marketplace. Aspirants must have also have access to the requisite technologies for producing and distributing their content. Even DSLR cameras are pretty much mandated. The cell phone camera doesn't work anymore for a lot of these young women I've been talking to. And finally, networking, events, conferences, various forms of training also require reserves of time, energy, and capital and really leave the playing field highly uneven. Yet those I interviewed continued to draw upon discourses of ordinariness and realness to establish themselves as members of a broad-based middle class, or what my informants described as the everyday girl. So I have up here a quote from Danielle. And here Danielle is explaining how she chooses the products to feature on her blog. She says, "I'm fully aware of the fact that I've been working since I got out of college for the same company, so financially I do well in my normal job. But I don't want it to seem like I'm not an approachable person, or that I live in this great place where I can afford all these super expensive things all the time." That's what I talk about. I want to be approachable and relatable. Similarly, a woman, Emily, I interviewed, said, I have nicer things, not many, but I have some high-end products, but I try to balance it out in my blog. So if I'm wearing she said, if I'm not wearing my Tory Burch bag, I also want to feature Old Navy clothes. And so here we can see that bloggers are almost trying to deflect or downplay their own economic status. These ideals of realness and approachability also frame participants' imperative to continuously share moments of their personal lives, a compulsion to participate in what Sarah Binet-Weiser has called the post-feminist economy of visibility. My informants often emphasize the imperative to, quote, put themselves out there by showcasing these presumably private moments of their life on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and more. So Rachel explained, she said, people have been following me for my whole life. So she really enjoyed the documentary style. The quote up here, I show people I've dated in my different friend groups, stuff where I really document my personal life. She later shared, she said, my readers were very responsive and knew about my father's health care issues as well as my own, whatever it may be. But she really seemed to take pleasure in this documentary lifestyle. But many other people expressed some anxieties and ambivalences about sharing these moments of their personal lives. One woman I interviewed recently was saying how difficult it was. She was on her honeymoon, and she said, I felt like I was ignoring my husband because I kept feeling like I had to document this to put it on Instagram and so forth. Poor guy. So for others, this anxiety came from giving oneself up to public scrutiny. So here's a quote from Olivia. And Olivia said that she actually abandoned her blogging project because of the discomfort she felt from, again, putting herself out there, this obligation to self-disclose. She shared, I felt too self-conscious to do it. I feel like you have to really be out there. You have to want to pursue it. So yeah, I think that's where I didn't want to continue. And I didn't want to promote myself and take a bunch of pictures. And so we can see again this visibility imperative. It felt kind of uncomfortable for her. And for others still, these economies of visibility impacted their own sense of self-worth. Christie's comment in particular speaks to this. So the background on Christie is she was a young woman interested in art. She actually won, this was back in the early days of fashion blogging, I guess around 2009. She won this contest to become a blogger for a year for this company. And she said she kind of rose to fame relatively quickly. And here she's reflecting on the experience of how she felt when she was suddenly at all these blogger events and exposed to this public visibility. I've never been more overly concerned about my body than when I was a blogger, which is weird because when I started blogging, I was very much like, yeah, we need people of all body types out there. I'm so not about hating on models. I think they're gorgeous, but I just want to see a little more representation, a little more variety, right? Yeah, this is what bloggers will do. Bloggers will make it so there's a lot of variety and we'll all be represented in stuff. And it very much turned into me like, oh my God, I need to lose weight. I was so overly concerned. I shouldn't have cared that much. You know what I mean? I should have let it affect me, but it did. And so comments such as this reveal how this much vaunted imperative to put oneself out there is fraught with contradiction, as these social media producers really have to toe this line between visibility and vulnerability, especially as females in these very public digital spaces. Okay, the third feature, relationship building. So perhaps not surprisingly, the project of the Aspirational Labor also involves building and maintaining relationships with one's social online community. Importantly, these expressions of community, sociality, and affect are often stereotyped as, quote, feminine traits, require the management of feeling, or what Arlie Hochschild referred to as emotional labor. My informants acknowledge the emotional labor necessary to engage in these socially mediated performance of themselves. Kelly, for instance, said, it takes up a lot of time. The most important thing is to have a social presence, and in order to have a social presence, you really have to be on. And it was very interesting how many people talked about how the content creation, actually creating the blog, kind of took a backseat to the promotional aspects. Here's a quote from Caitlin, and she was kind of frustrated that her blog hadn't grown as quickly or as largely as she had hoped. And she really blamed this on the fact that she didn't have time to build her audience. She said, if I had $1 million and didn't have to work or didn't have a social life, then yeah, I would spend probably all this time to build it. That's a lot of what they do to a certain extent. And so, it might be obvious, but the reason they're doing this is because growing followers is a means to an end, namely a way to participate in this digital media system where advertisers and affiliate networks compensate individuals based on their potential impact on members of the social media community. Typically, bigger translates into better. And it's really interesting if individuals want to join an affiliate network, bloggers want to join this affiliate network where they can get compensated for their various forms of work, they need to have a baseline minimum of followers. The Blog Inc. manual recommends 1,000 visitors a day or 100,000 page views a month before they launch an ad program. And I was at a conference a few months ago where they said, if you have any hopes of monetizing, you need to have at least 10,000 followers before you reach anyone. And that to me, you can hear people kind of gasping because, the time and energy, again, required to maintain this sort of relationship, build this relationship, keep this number of followers. There really is a lot of labor involved here. The final feature I want to talk about really dovetails on this, and calling it brand devotion. And it's essentially the fact that aspirational laborers understand self-branding as imperative to their own creative projects, imperative to their own work. But an important and gendered aspect of this is, again, what I'm calling brand devotion, and it's the idea that content creators visibly align themselves with certain brands in hopes of generating sponsorships, collaborations, or even free swag. And so the way this typically works is a fashion blogger or a vlogger will spend time on Instagram tagging, mentioning, or publicly showing their devotion to a brand in hopes that the brand will reach out and say, okay, hey, we'd love to work with you. In some cases it works. So here's just some examples you can see on Instagram, people tagging different brands on here. And again, the idea is, well, maybe Chick Wish will reach out and thank me, and maybe they'll pin whatever it may be. But typically there's really this idea that they want to start a collaboration with us. And sometimes it works out. So I spoke with a young woman named Stephanie, and she said that she did a lot of shopping at TJ Maxx, and she said she would always tag her purchases from TJ Maxx, and they reached out to her, and she was featured as one of their, in that campaign, the TJ Maxx Fashionistas, and she was really excited. She got to come to New York and do a photo shoot, and so, in some cases it works out. But more often, brands are paying in this always deferred promise of, quote, exposure. So during an interview, Alice explained to me how frustrated she feels about the lack of compensation offered to members of the blogging community. She said, an excerpt is up here, some of the PR representatives don't know what we're doing is actual work. They think it's free to ask us whatever they want. They send us an email, they're being so rude, they think they get a lot of money on us. And she offered the example of one, quote, $1 million company. She asked about the issue of compensation, and the brand rep said, we don't have a budget for that. In instances such as this, the brand's payment through visibility maintains that her labor actually remains invisible. So, to wrap up, the features of aspirational labor that I've just discussed draw on the same market logics of audience building and ad generation that structure traditional media work. Yet by veiling these amateur activities in discourses of newness and possibility, they deflect attention away from more deeply entrenched work realities, particularly those related to gender and class subjectivities. So in closing, I want to consider what the motivations, efforts, and investments of aspirational laborers can teach us about more widespread trends in media work in this unfolding digital economy. Certainly the ascension of digital media has really foregrounded the glowing clout of creative enthusiasts whose passion really trumps any traditional markers of expertise. And these individuals believe that their time and energy will pay off as they get discovered, make a living from their passion projects, or get hired into a traditional creative industry. And these same motivations underlie the vast system of unpaid internships, as well as freelance work and user-generated ad contests. So I want to close by saying, as we seek to answer the question of do these activities pay off, we also need to think about how they pay off and perhaps more importantly, for whom. Thank you.
Okay, so the first time I saw a Facebook friend post a makeup-free selfie, I was thrilled. This particular woman had posted a number of selfies before, including, the duck face. But usually she didn't comment much, or she just said where she was when the picture was taken. This time there was more commentary, not just about herself, but about unrealistic beauty expectations for all women. She ended it with the words, "This is me." And I was proud of her, since it seemed like she'd been heavily invested in the beauty standard that she was critiquing. And it was also a nice twist on the tabloid trend of publishing photos of celebrities with makeup and then pointing out that underneath all that eyeliner, there was a celebrity who was just like us. More and more of these makeup-free selfies began to show up in my timeline, and eventually it had gotten its own hashtag, #NoMakeupSelfie. The pleasure I'd first felt in seeing women showcase themselves au naturel began to fade, and in its place I felt this form of spectatorship. I began to wonder not so much about individual women taking part in the meme, or even about the beauty standard in general, but about why so many women were taking this particular struggle public at this particular moment, and I wondered about what might be coming next. Social media has contributed to the entrenchment of the idea that women, and in growing numbers men, see their relationship with their looks as something negative that must be overcome in order to ensure psychic contentment. In fact, various memes have emerged to form a ready-made template that young women now use to publicly enact the arc of the therapeutic narrative. So first, a quick definition of the therapeutic narrative. It's basically just a person's story of overcoming personal trauma or anguish in order to reach a place of personal understanding. It can be used in a clinical setting, and there are actually practitioners who specialize in helping patients write their own narrative, which helps them feel more in control of their story and therefore of their own lives. Sociologically speaking, as defined by Eva Illouz, it's received attention as far as what you might call the Oprahfication of America. The ways in which people's trauma, particularly women's trauma, is rendered into a streamlined story featuring a common path of healing that can trace its roots to emotional clarity. It's easily applied to what we could call the therapeutic body narrative or the therapeutic beauty narrative, which sees people telling their stories of overcoming their personal struggles of the strict standards of beauty and thinness imposed upon them by the society at large. And if your Facebook feed is anything like mine, you see evidence of this narrative all the time. Just yesterday morning, it was 16 honest quotes about body image from famous women, nearly all of which framed body image as something negative that needed to be overcome. So social media allows people to publicly enact this narrative. And we see almost all of the entire storyline in a variety of memes. The beginning point of innocence, the point of injury, the struggle to get over it, and then the content self that has gone through it all. So at the beginning of the therapeutic narrative, you have this idea of the healthy self, which is usually posed as being a carefree child that kids aren't on social media yet. But as their proxy, we have this meme of parents' open letters to children, almost explicitly their daughters, about the need to stay psychologically intact through the emotional hurricanes to come. Reads one that received nearly 100,000 direct shares. Maybe a father's words can deliver his daughter through this gauntlet of institutionalized shame and into a deep, unshakable sense of her own worthiness and beauty. Reads another, people will call you names. They may call you ugly, stupid, fat, and the popular, you're just a girl, but these words will never define you. So these letters serve as an introduction to the next phase of the therapeutic narrative, the crisis. Now this is the point of injury, which for most people, most girls, is the preteen years. Enter the Am I Pretty video, in which young women upload videos of themselves and ask viewers to tell them whether they are pretty or ugly. There's been a lot of attention about how these memes can become a sort of invitational open season on young women and their vulnerability, as if women didn't suffer enough digital harassment already. But there's also like this supportive angle here. The responses lead toward the positive, either by declaring that the girl in the video is indeed pretty and not ugly, or by offering softer affirmation like, well, you're a cutie, or who cares as long as you're pretty on the inside. And then if the comments turn nasty, other users tend to rally to the original poster's defense. So even in this crisis phase, we begin to see these community attempts to get to the next phase of the therapeutic narrative, which is overcoming the point of injury. And within that phase, we have a lot of creative attempts to overcome this injury and this anguish. For example, there's the makeup-free selfie, which is often posited as proof of bravery or courage for daring to show an unadorned vision of oneself. And there are some other particularly poignant memes from individuals that have gone viral, like that from weight loss blogger Matt Diaz, who made a video about what happens to your skin after you lose 270 pounds. And then there was Carly O'Connell, who posted the famous Harley's ass photo. This was a teenager who was responding to a bit of graffiti that had compared her derriere to a concrete barrier at a local beach. Now, each of these showcases either vulnerability or resistance, and each of them garnered so much publicity that both Diaz and O'Connell wound up on national talk shows. And then, at the end of the narrative, we have the now repaired self. This self might pose in a fat bikini, or play with the idea of traditional beauty notions by posting ugly selfies, as seen on the Tumblr Pretty Girls, Ugly Faces. And there are also people who have taken the therapeutic narrative to a place of literal therapy, specifically therapy targeting eating disorders. And some of these women post before and after treatment photos that subvert the usual before and after weight loss photos. So the specifics of the therapeutic arc might vary, but the story remains essentially the same, with the social media enactment of the therapeutic narrative forming a digital rite of passage toward fully self-actualized adulthood. These enactments have often been touted as a healthy or even subversive way for young women to break through the beauty imperative. And they do actually have some subversive power. People in marginalized and oppressed groups can participate and make themselves more visible in the culture at large. And participants of all sorts have the opportunity to define themselves instead of just accepting or silently rejecting the mainstream beauty standards that we're all subject to. They can be touch points for community, they can be a form of self-expression, a form of play, and place they can be all of the digital positive arguments that you've probably heard about selfies in general. And given the enormous emphasis on regulating women's appearance and the ways that can negatively shape depending women's self-esteem, we're undoubtedly better off in a world where a woman in a size 20 fat bikini can post a selfie and collect as many likes as a picture of a woman in a size 2 swimsuit. But whenever large numbers of people enact publicly a similar narrative, we need to pay close attention. In fact, corporations have been paying close attention by co-opting the social media of the therapeutic narrative. The most blooming example here is the Dove Real Beauty campaign, which began in 2004 but quickly adopted social media into its strategy. Dove makes a lot of these share-friendly campaigns that have probably shown up in your Facebook feed. And most recently, it was this Choose Beautiful campaign, which, judging from its backlash, was less successful than its prior campaigns, including the famous Evolution video, which was viewed more than 12 million times in its first year. But it's also actually created entire campaigns around the very idea of how social media can be a constructive part of the therapeutic narrative, as with its short film that was actually entitled Selfie, which had young women teach their mothers how to take selfies. The idea was that in the process, both the younger and the elder women of the family would get to heal through the power of self-documentation. More recently, fashion line Lane Bryant has been featuring plus-size models in the brand's lingerie, along with the hashtag #I'mNoAngel, which takes direct aim at the Victoria's Secret Angels campaign, which is the pinnacle of unrealistic beauty standards. Lane Bryant then asked their audience to, quote, join the women who are redefining sexy by posting your personal statement of confidence using the hashtag #I'mNoAngel, dozens of which that can now be found on the company website. Reebok used a similar idea with its Break Your Selfie campaign, which asks users to upload photos of themselves post-workout, red-faced, sweaty, droopy-haired, makeup-free, because, as the campaign's website puts it, today's selfie culture has us obsessing over projecting images of our most flawless, perfect selves. But maybe we're at our best and most beautiful when we're pushing beyond our limits. So what these ads tell us, and what the entire enactment of the therapeutic beauty narrative with social media tells us, is that where women were once expected to regulate their bodies around the beauty standard, we're now expected to regulate our emotional response to that same standard, and we're expected to do it publicly. Not only is there a template of idealized female beauty, with which, by the way, we're all expected to match still, there is also now a template of how to appropriately respond to that template on an emotional level. Overcoming in a complete manner is posed as the route toward being a role model, is posed as the route towards happiness. Overcoming it is what the ideal woman has done, and she's done it pretty thoroughly. She doesn't have self-doubt dangling around, and once she's finished her narrative arc, there's no room for fluctuation in her self-image. There's no room for the bodily self-consciousness that some philosophers would say is just a part of the human condition. One of the most idealistic aims of social media is for us to collectively gather around the issues that affect our communities and create change. At their best, the grassroots social media movements and their corporate counterparts do that. But I can't help but wonder what happens when we reinforce this narrative by packaging it with hashtags and presenting this final, unshakable self as the end product of the journey. Many of us do have a therapeutic narrative of sorts, but it's messy and it's drippier and it's more stuttering and stumbling than any of these well-crafted storylines allow. And it's that very messiness that might well be the route to contentment. Decades before social media, I was transcribing my own personal narrative, writing in my diary at age 16, "I'm so glad I'm over all that." No, never mind, this 16 was actually a low point of my self-image. I'd constructed my therapeutic narrative and I was sticking to it. So I wonder about young women today. Might they cycle through this same narrative, posting selfie after selfie and feeling this psychic victory each time, and then feeling a sense of letdown when their own narrative stutters come into play? I recently looked at the Facebook page of the woman who posted that first no makeup selfie that I saw. She was seeking advice on two things: what to get for her son's 3rd birthday, and how to fit into her pre-motherhood jeans once again.
Actually, yeah, you can totally clap for all of our panelists. I want to open it up to questions, but first, let's check in with Max, our Hashmod, see if there's any. Yeah. It's okay.
I guess there were a couple of specific questions and a couple of comments. I think regarding the wearables, there was some question about sort of about what to do as these devices become more ubiquitous, more invisible. Rob Horning says, when trackers and devices become invisible, their ubiquity must be presumed, like an optic watcher. And at Service Sphere says, researchers finding that the quantified self that theorizing the web, oh, this is why we can't have nice things.
So let's do one by, so the first question, talking on, can you repeat it?
It was just, when trackers and devices become invisible, their ubiquity must be presumed, like an optic watch. I guess this would be more of a, do you agree with that sort of notion or not?
Yeah, I think it'll become the norm, and I guess this assumption is why we need to have to take more vigilance to, I think when it's invisible, I think it becomes forgettable. I don't know, is that my answer to the question?
Well, I think I just sort of highlight these because they were sort of standing out as this, what do we do as these wearable devices become
I think we need to have a conversation.
accessible?
I think there needs to be more conversation, because what concerns me is that there already are becoming pretty ubiquitous without much concern about it, and then convenience and to me they seem the value they're providing is super gimmicky, and the dangers are pretty high already. But there's no conversation or very little mainstream conversation. So I guess as they get more invisible, I think it just needs to be like more and more like, let's sound alarms or just try to talk about it.
Does anyone remember the fuss over GPS going into our devices? So maybe we can make more of a fuss.
And then also for our last speaker, there was a very sort of grounded question about how does overcoming differ from contentment in what you were describing?
As I'm talking about here, overcoming is actually more the act of reaching contentment. So yeah, it's the journey toward getting there.
Thank you. Thank you, the internet, and yeah. Does anybody else have a question? Over here on the green.
Thank you all for your presentations. They were wonderful. How do you see convenience really playing into this? I've heard it touched on a few times, convenience and authenticity, and they seem to grease each other. How do you find in your research that the fact to make things convenient actually is what's driving things, not really the fact to be authentic?
Well, at least in a lot of the promotional rhetoric around wearables going fashionable is this idea of seamlessness. So that, I put that word a lot in at least these expos. That seems to be the holy grail. You can just load through your life and your devices and doing their things. You don't even have to know they're there. So that's very convenient, I guess. Like, when it's seamless, you don't notice any difference between yourself, your technology, or what you're doing. So that might be driving some of it. That seems to be what making the devices are thinking is what we want.
Also, I think the word intuitive is one that's kind of a bit of a buzzword. I think that the word authentic will start being the kind of the backlash, like the same way like people get into vinyl records or something. I think like the authenticity will be like this like halo yesteryear pre-tracking.
There's a question.
Just to respond to we remember the fuss about GPS. We do remember the fuss about GPS, but does anybody in the room have a device without GPS?
And a mentor might
Okay, because the point is, GPS has a value for the device. I understand why I want GPS. I don't understand why I need to track everything about me. I don't understand why I need to suffer looking the way I look with the Google Glass. Will the fuss make the difference between adoption and failure?
Well, I don't know that the fuss is going to make a difference, although I'd like to talk to you later, though. I'm going to think about it, because I think it's an important question.
Okay, there's another question.
This is sort of a follow-up. There was sort of a distinction between devices that can augment experience and other kinds of devices and the augmentation being positive. Just curious sort of what you guys might find something that augments experience or their examples.
I mean, I think that vibrating, I think those Thunderwear vibrating underpants are one of the most popular examples of, I guess, augmenting experience. I don't know if there's another one.
So I don't know. I don't go to like big shows with music because I'm an old buddy. But apparently, if there are stadium experiences people are having these days where they're wearing something that lights up to the music and you're all together as a crowd, and I mean that might be one. It's very simple, but and then there are these T-shirts by the same person who did the underwear that the players in a match will be wearing them, and so will the fans, and the fans will feel like the heartbeat and the I don't know how they call it, the adrenaline, but somehow the rush that the player feels when they're on the field. The fan has the shirt on. I think it's called a fan shirt. So that's an idea maybe also authentic.
I just want to say like they actually, but I think that some of the things like on the horizon make more sense. Like if you have a shirt that like, if you have a jacket that like when the weather changes, like if the sun comes out and you don't have to like, you know like those days where you take your jacket off like 800 times, like to me that seems like that's value, but like what they're offering right now doesn't, in my opinion, that much to be giving up the privacy. It just doesn't seem like enough value.
Just to offer maybe one example of a wearable that does augment an experience are the Disney Magic Bands, which are these RFID wristbands that you need to be able to, you don't need them, but you use them to better access the park, and you can't get into the priority line to get on rides without them. And so maybe as a follow-up to that, what do you feel about kids using wearables and you know, the trackers for your babies that, you know, measure them at night and help them in case they get lost, you know, it's like a beacon so you can find your kid, and how is this going to change parenting and growing up?
And consent, how does that change? It just made me think, I haven't thought about that, like our dog had a chip in it as a kid. I mean, I guess I can see parents buying these products for sure. But again, I guess like, again, it's like a convenience. That's a great convenience you can find your kid, but then it normalizes this like monitoring and tracking. And if your kid has a chip in it, then you're probably going to think it's less weird to have a chip in you. And
Do you want to speak to this? So there is a product that you can put on your child that the person who's selling it, I forget the name of it, but they were trying to sell it as it gives your child more freedom because they can just wander off like free-range kids, but you know where they are. Then I do wonder about the child's sense of self and their responsibility for themselves. And maybe they would end up being freed in a way that they would be done with this life. Because they would think, oh, it doesn't matter, I can jump off this cliff with my parents. I'll be able to find your I don't know. Not that I'm going to that though, but there are a lot of issues that are really not explored in depth. We're already thinking, oh, it's safe, let's buy it. So I hope that conversations like this can challenge some of that sales rhetoric and help consumers be more aware of what they're buying and putting on their baby or in their dog.
Anymore? There's a question in front here.
He's mine.
This is mostly for Brooke. I'm really interested in how people are sort of turning their very personal lives into content, the way you're talking about. I'm seeing it a lot on Snapchat. What do you think you're talking about that one girl who she did a sponsorship with TJ Maxx, and I'm seeing things like that where people are being very, very personal on social media and then putting native advertisements on their very personal lives. What do you think the dangers of that are? It seems like it could be bad, it could be also really bad. It could be good in some ways, but it could also be really bad. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny. It's you know, there's the question of what I think about it and what my participants think about it, and I'll start with that first. But I mean, the narrative that I've heard over and over again reminds me of. Does anybody remember this? I've asked this before, and I think everyone can think of. There was a Brady Bunch episode where they wanted Carol to her family to sign off on some laundry detergent, and she said, "I'll only do it if I like it." She didn't like it. Does anyone remember this, or should I hallucinate? Yes. Okay. Thank you. You're my best friend. My informants say the same thing over and over again. Like, the reason I'm doing this is because I love this brand, and it's so important to me, and so I get to share it to the world. And so there's no sense of selling out at all. It's very much this aligns with my identity, and what a lot of them have said, hey, if I can get money doing this off something I love, then it's fantastic. So this is kind of how they rationalize it. I mean, I'm critical of it for many reasons. In one sense, it's gratifying to see when they actually get compensated for this, because in so many cases they don't. But just to see this further conflation of the self and the brand, and how important it is for them to establish a niche for themselves. I'm in the niche of, someone's like, she's a preppy girl, or she's, whatever their authentic identity is, whatever style they have. Or is this really the self-expression, or is this a self-expression marketing community finds very valuable and wants to reach this person for.
Something to add to that, because I do beauty blogging sort of in a different way, but it's been uncanny, the brands that are clearly really, some of them are like, test out on you, some my moisturizer will play. And others really paying attention. And they're like, you look like this, you with your content and your message, and they're scarily after. I say no, but I mean, if I were a different kind of blogger, I would very easily say yes. They've done the research.
So we have time for one last question.
I'm just curious, as people see that their love of a product can become a strategy for their own success, and they sell out either intentionally or subconsciously, what would be the next coin of currency for people who want to actually know the true value of things? Because I go on to Amazon, I don't know what comments are coming from Buzz Networks, Chinese click farms. I mean, they're obviously responding to this by saying this is a verified purchaser when they make a comment, and I ignore all the others. What's next?
Life blogging, where you tune into channels of people living their lives and you like tuning into that channel and watching what they use and getting the products that they're using. I don't know, maybe it's tomorrow, but that's the thought.
No, I mean, we mentioned this before, but the currency is so much this constantly pushing word authenticity and organic. It's just it's written all over the blogs and in the discussions and so forth. And it's interesting. I think it was in 2009 and 2010, the FTC actually required bloggers to disclose any free gifts, whether it's sponsorships and so forth. And the question is, to what extent is this regulation taking place? And it's really not in many cases. And so what I've noticed a lot of bloggers do is, rather than write on each product, this was given, this was gifted, they have kind of this catch-all on their bio that says, some of these products were given to me, but it's only because I really love the product and it's a great review. And so that's kind of again the way to justify it. So the currency becomes authenticity, and this becomes it's such a constructive term that this becomes a way for the marketers to go after and say, okay, well, hey, we can go through this person, and they're going to probably take a lot less money and reach more, quote followers and growth